The ground team was pinned down, bleeding out, and their air support couldn't get close enough without hitting friendlies. Then the transport pilot they'd barely noticed said quietly, "I can make that shot." What they discovered next about Captain Sarah Chen's past explained why she'd been flying cargo runs for 4 years instead of combat missions. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of unrecognized heroes. The pre-dawn darkness at Bagram Airfield was broken only by the runway lights that guided Captain Sarah Chen as she completed her pre-flight inspection of the C-130 Hercules transport aircraft. At 0430 hours, she moved around the massive cargo plane with practiced efficiency, checking control surfaces, inspecting engines, and verifying that the aircraft was ready for another routine supply run to forward operating Base Phoenix. For 4 years, Sarah had maintained this same schedule: early morning departure, midday arrival at various forward bases, cargo offload, return flight by evening. The routine was predictable, safe, and exactly what she had requested when she transferred from combat aviation to transport operations. Her fellow pilots rarely questioned why someone with her qualifications had chosen to fly cargo instead of engaging enemy targets, and Sarah preferred it that way. The C-130 represented a different kind of flying than what had defined the first 8 years of her Air Force career. Transport operations required precision navigation, careful weight distribution calculations, and the ability to land on improvised airfields, but they didn't require the split-second targeting decisions that could determine whether friendly forces lived or died. Sarah wore her flight suit with the same professional bearing that had characterized her military service since graduation from the Air Force Academy. But the patches on her shoulders told only part of her story. The current insignia indicated transport operations, cargo delivery, and logistics support. Missing were the patches that would have identified her previous specialization in close air support and precision ground attack missions. As she completed her inspection and prepared to board the aircraft, Sarah noticed increased activity around the base operations center. Radio traffic was more intense than usual, and ground crews were preparing equipment that suggested urgent rather than routine operations. Something was developing that would require resources beyond standard supply missions. Captain Mike Torres, the operations officer responsible for coordinating flight schedules, approached Sarah's aircraft with the purposeful stride that indicated changing mission parameters. At 35, Torres had managed flight operations at Bagram for 2 years, becoming familiar with the capabilities and limitations of every pilot under his command. "Chen, we need to modify your flight plan," Torres said, consulting his clipboard while simultaneously monitoring radio communications through his headset. "Priority cargo for FOB Phoenix, plus possible emergency extraction depending on ground situation development." Sarah nodded acknowledgement while continuing her pre-flight routine. Emergency extractions were uncommon but not unprecedented for transport operations. Her aircraft was equipped for medical evacuation if required, though she hoped the ground situation would resolve without casualties. "What's the nature of the emergency?" Sarah asked, beginning to calculate fuel requirements for extended loiter time if an extraction became necessary. "Special operations team conducting high-value target elimination," Torres replied. "Intelligence suggests the target is heavily defended, and ground forces may need rapid extraction if the operation becomes compromised." Sarah felt familiar tension in her chest at the mention of close air support operations, though her role would be limited to extraction rather than combat engagement. For 4 years, she had successfully avoided situations that required her to make targeting decisions that could affect friendly forces. The flight to FOB Phoenix passed without incident, following established corridors that avoided known threat areas while maintaining communication with ground controllers who provided updates on the developing operation. Sarah's C-130 was configured for cargo delivery and potential medical evacuation, but not for the kind of precision engagement that might be required if ground forces encountered heavy resistance. Upon arrival at FOB Phoenix, Sarah completed the cargo offload while monitoring radio communications that provided increasingly urgent updates about the Special Operations mission. Team Alpha had successfully located their high-value target, but the compound was more heavily defended than intelligence had indicated. "All stations, this is Phoenix Control," came the voice of Major Lisa Rodriguez, the base operations commander. "Team Alpha is engaged with approximately 20 enemy combatants in fortified positions, requesting immediate close air support for extraction." Sarah continued her post-flight inspection while listening to communications that described a tactical situation she recognized from her previous combat experience. Team Alpha was pinned down in an urban environment where precision engagement would be required to suppress enemy fire without endangering friendly forces. Phoenix Control, this is Viper Flight, responded the leader of an F-16 fighter squadron that had been placed on standby for the operation. Weather conditions and proximity to friendlies make engagement inadvisable. Recommend alternate extraction plan. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Team Alpha consisted of 6 operators who had been conducting surveillance for 3 days before attempting to eliminate their target. Now they were trapped in a compound surrounded by enemy forces who had superior numbers and defensive positions. Phoenix Control, Team Alpha, came the strained voice of Staff Sergeant Marcus Jackson, the team leader. We have 2 wounded, ammunition running low, and enemy forces are maneuvering for assault positions. We need immediate air support or we're not getting out of here. Sarah finished securing her aircraft and began walking toward the operations center, drawn by communications that described exactly the type of situation she had once specialized in resolving. For 4 years she had avoided combat operations, but hearing fellow soldiers in mortal danger created conflicts she had hoped never to face again. Major Rodriguez was studying tactical displays that showed Team Alpha's position relative to enemy forces when Sarah entered the operations center. The situation was clearly desperate. 6 American soldiers surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces with limited ammunition and no apparent escape route. Major Rodriguez, Sarah said, approaching the tactical display with the professional demeanor that had characterized all her military interactions. I've been monitoring communications. What are the specific challenges preventing air support? Rodriguez looked up from her maps with the expression of someone dealing with an impossible tactical problem. Weather is marginal, but the main issue is proximity. Enemy forces are within 50 meters of our people in multiple directions. Any close air support risks hitting friendlies. Sarah studied the tactical display, recognizing terrain features and tactical situations that triggered memories from her previous specialization. The enemy positions were indeed close to friendly forces, requiring the kind of precision engagement that few pilots were willing to attempt under these conditions. What about the A-10 squadron? Sarah asked, referring to aircraft specifically designed for close air support missions. Deployed to another theater, Rodriguez replied, we have F-16s available, but their ordnance isn't suitable for danger-close operations in urban terrain. Sarah felt the familiar calculation process beginning in her mind. Target identification, ordnance selection, approach angles, and collateral damage assessment. For 4 years, she had suppressed this analytical thinking, but hearing American soldiers in mortal danger made neutrality impossible. Major Rodriguez, Sarah said quietly, I believe I can provide the air support Team Alpha requires. Rodriguez looked at Sarah with confusion that quickly shifted to skepticism. Captain Chen, you're transport qualified. This situation requires combat aviation expertise beyond cargo operations. Yes, ma'am, it does, Sarah agreed. And I have that expertise. The operations center fell silent except for continuing radio communications from Team Alpha, whose situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Every person in the room knew that Sarah flew transport missions, but none had reason to suspect she possessed combat capabilities. Captain Chen, Rodriguez said carefully, what kind of combat experience are you claiming? Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would reveal aspects of her background she had deliberately concealed for 4 years. Ma'am, I flew A-10 Warthogs for 8 years before transferring to transport operations. I have over 200 combat missions and extensive experience with danger close air support. The revelation surprised everyone in the operations center who had known Sarah solely as a cargo pilot. Rodriguez leaned forward with intense interest while other personnel stopped their work to listen to an unexpected claim of specialized expertise. Captain, if you have A-10 experience, why are you flying transport missions? Rodriguez asked. The question touched on personal history that Sarah had hoped never to discuss in operational settings, but the desperate situation of Team Alpha made continued concealment impossible. Personal reasons, ma'am, but my qualifications remain current, and I believe I can save those soldiers. Rodriguez studied Sarah's personnel file on her computer screen, finding records that confirmed advanced combat training but provided no details about why someone with such qualifications had transferred to non-combat roles. Captain Chen, close air support in urban terrain requires split-second decisions that could determine whether American soldiers live or die, Rodriguez said. Are you prepared to make those decisions? Sarah felt the weight of past decisions that had led her to seek the safety of transport operations, but also recognized that 6 soldiers would die without immediate intervention. Yes, ma'am, I'm prepared. Rodriguez made a command decision that would be reviewed and questioned for months afterward, but felt absolutely necessary given the circumstances. Captain Chen, you're authorized to conduct close air support for Team Alpha. What do you need? Access to an A-10 aircraft, current target coordinates, and direct communication with Team Alpha, Sarah replied, feeling familiar adrenaline beginning to flow as she transitioned from transport pilot to combat aviator. Within 20 minutes, Sarah was conducting pre-flight inspection of an A-10 Thunderbolt II that had been undergoing maintenance at FOB Phoenix. The aircraft represented everything she had tried to leave behind: the GAU-8 30mm cannon designed for precision ground attack, the armored cockpit built to survive ground fire, and the targeting systems that required split-second decisions about life and death. But
as she settled into the familiar cockpit and began pre-combat checklists, Sarah also felt the return of capabilities she had spent 4 years suppressing. Her hands moved over controls with muscle memory that hadn't diminished despite years of flying cargo aircraft, and her mind automatically began calculating approach vectors and target priorities. Team Alpha, this is Hammer Flight, Sarah radioed as the A-10 lifted off from FOB Phoenix. I'm inbound for close air support. Transmit current position and enemy locations. Hammer Flight, Team Alpha, came Jackson's voice, relief evident despite the continuing sound of gunfire. We're in the northeast corner of the compound. Grid reference 4278. Enemy positions are south, east, and west of our location. Closest contact approximately 40 meters. Sarah processed the tactical information while approaching the target area, using skills that had been dormant but not forgotten. 40 meters was extremely close for air support operations, requiring precision that exceeded standard military training and pushed the boundaries of acceptable risk. Through her targeting systems, Sarah could see the compound where Team Alpha was trapped. Enemy muzzle flashes were clearly visible in multiple positions that formed a rough semicircle around the building where friendly forces had taken shelter. The tactical situation was exactly the type of challenge she had once specialized in resolving. Team Alpha, Hammer Flight has visual contact with your position, Sarah reported. I'm going to engage enemy positions in sequence, starting with southern approach. Keep your heads down. Sarah lined up her first attack run with the precision that had made her legendary in her previous combat assignment. The GAU-8 cannon was designed for exactly this type of engagement, surgical strikes that could eliminate threats without endangering nearby friendly forces. The first burst of cannon fire lasted exactly 3 seconds, directed at enemy positions that were threatening Team Alpha's southern flank. The rounds impacted with devastating accuracy, eliminating threats that had been preventing the ground team's movement toward extraction points. Hammer Flight, excellent hits on southern positions, Jackson reported. Can you engage western approach? Sarah was already maneuvering for her second attack run, calculating wind conditions and approach angles with automatic precision. The western enemy positions were closer to friendly forces, requiring even greater accuracy than her first engagement. The second attack run eliminated enemy forces that had been advancing on Team Alpha's position, providing the ground team with an opportunity to move toward a more defensible location within the compound. Sarah's precision was extraordinary. Each burst of cannon fire struck exactly where intended without any rounds impacting near friendly positions. Team Alpha, Hammer Flight, Sarah radioed. Enemy resistance appears neutralized on southern and western approaches. Can you move to extraction point? Negative, Hammer Flight, Jackson replied. Eastern positions still active and we have wounded who can't move quickly. We need those positions eliminated before we can extract. The eastern enemy positions presented Sarah's greatest challenge. They were positioned in buildings that were only 35 meters from Team Alpha's location, requiring precision that exceeded even her previous experience. Any error in targeting could result in friendly fire casualties. Sarah approached the eastern positions with calculated deliberation, using targeting systems and manual flying skills that represented the pinnacle of close air support expertise. The margin for error was essentially zero. Finus. Success would save 6 American soldiers, while failure could kill them through friendly fire. Her final attack run was a masterpiece of precision aviation. Short, controlled bursts of cannon fire eliminated enemy positions that had threatened Team Alpha, while avoiding any impact near friendly forces. The targeting was so accurate that Jackson later described it as surgical. Hammer Flight. All enemy positions neutralized, Jackson reported with obvious relief. Team Alpha moving to extraction point. Outstanding air support. As Sarah provided overhead protection while Team Alpha moved to their helicopter extraction point, she reflected on the transition from transport pilot to combat aviator that circumstances had forced upon her. For 4 years, she had avoided making targeting decisions that could affect friendly forces, but hearing fellow soldiers in mortal danger had made neutrality impossible. The extraction helicopter arrived without incident, collecting Team Alpha and their wounded while Sarah maintained overwatch from above. The mission had been successful. 6 American soldiers were returning home because she had been willing to use skills she had tried to abandon. Upon returning to FOB Phoenix, Sarah found Major Rodriguez waiting at the flight line with expressions that combined professional respect with obvious curiosity about the transport pilot who had just conducted textbook close air support operations. Captain Chen, that was extraordinary flying, Rodriguez said as Sarah completed her post-flight inspection. Team Alpha reported that your precision was unlike anything they'd experienced in previous operations. Thank you, ma'am, Sarah replied, though her tone carried the same measured professionalism that had characterized her transport operations rather than satisfaction typically associated with successful combat missions. Rodriguez studied Sarah with new understanding. Captain, I have to ask about your background. Flying Flying of that caliber suggests extensive combat experience, but your records show transport operations for the past 4 years. Sarah had known this conversation would come eventually, the moment when her deliberate transition from combat to non-combat operations would require explanation. The successful mission had demonstrated capabilities that couldn't be easily dismissed or explained through basic flight training. "Ma'am, I flew combat missions for 8 years before requesting transfer to transport operations," Sarah explained carefully. "I found satisfaction in logistics work and preferred to avoid combat situations when possible." Rodriguez recognized the careful phrasing that suggested personal reasons beyond professional preferences. "Captain, talent like yours is rare. Have you considered returning to combat aviation?" The question represented everything Sarah had been trying to avoid for 4 years. The pressure to utilize specialized skills that came with psychological costs she had found difficult to manage. Today's mission had been necessary to save lives, but it had also reminded her why she had sought the safety of transport operations. "Ma'am, I'm committed to my current assignment," Sarah replied diplomatically. Today was an exception due to operational necessity. Rodriguez nodded with understanding that suggested familiarity with personnel who had complex relationships with their specialized capabilities. "Captain, I respect your choice, but I want you to know that what you did today saved 6 American lives. That matters more than career preferences." As the day concluded and normal base operations resumed, Sarah returned to her C-130 for the scheduled return flight to Bagram. The transport aircraft felt different now, not because its capabilities had changed, but because her relationship with aviation had been fundamentally altered by the day's events. For 4 years, she had successfully separated herself from combat operations, finding satisfaction in logistics work that supported military operations without requiring her to make targeting decisions. But hearing fellow soldiers in mortal danger had made that separation impossible to maintain. The flight back to Bagram provided time for reflection on the transition from transport pilot to combat aviator that circumstances had forced upon her. The successful close air support mission had demonstrated that her skills remained sharp despite years of non-use, but it had also reminded her why she had sought distance from combat operations. 3 weeks later, Sarah received orders for a new assignment that would combine transport operations with emergency combat support when required. The Chen protocol had been developed based on her unique demonstration of capabilities, creating a role that would allow her to maintain her preferred logistics focus while providing specialized skills when American lives were at stake. Sometimes, Sarah reflected as she prepared for another transport mission, the most important flight isn't the one you planned for. It's the one you never wanted to make but couldn't refuse when people's lives depended on it. The transport pilot who had shocked everyone by conducting perfect close air support continued her cargo operations with the knowledge that specialized skills, once acquired, remain available when duty demands their use. Her careful separation between transport and combat aviation had been permanently altered, but 6 American soldiers were alive because she had been willing to cross that line when crossing it became necessary. Captain Sarah Chen had proven that expertise in different domains could be combined when circumstances required comprehensive solutions, and that sometimes the most effective response to tactical problems came from those who understood both the capabilities and the costs of using specialized skills in life-and-death situations. The C-130 continued its routine supply missions, but everyone now knew that the pilot flying cargo runs possessed combat capabilities that had saved lives when conventional solutions failed. And Sarah had learned that some responsibilities can't be permanently avoided. They simply wait for the moment when avoiding them becomes impossible.